Hello, welcome to another tonalist landscape oil painting demonstration. This is your painter in residence, M. Francis McCarthy, and welcome as well to the Mastering George Inness series, day 11, or week 11 if you prefer. The painting I'm bringing you today is called Old Farm. It was painted by George in 1893, and unfortunately, your artist in residence accidentally deleted the drawing portion of the video, which always makes me a bit sad, but you know, best laid plans of mice and men and all that. Anyway, I think you'll enjoy watching me do the color portion of the painting, which is, you know, the bulk of the painting. Now, this painting is quite abstract. Those are supposed to be sheep. They're very, very rough, and it's possible, or even likely, that this painting was an unfinished painting in George's studio at the time of his death. It was signed, but there's more than a few rumors going around that George Inness Jr. was very adept at signing his father's signature. And since his father liked to keep working on the same painting surface over and over again, some of his paintings are like 7-8 paintings deep. So, yeah, it's not one of my issues. There's a few where I'll paint over the top, but usually I'll just move on to a whole new board. Yeah, there is something very cool though about working on top of an existing painting, and that was one of the things that drove me into working on and producing textured boards for a long time, since I really enjoyed that, the feeling or quality of that surface. I will be reading in a minute here from the catalog raisonné of George Inness and giving you some more information on this painting. It's quite interesting. Yeah, late period Inness, you know, really gets abstract. Which I found on one hand frustrating. On the other hand, it was okay because I don't feel like painting a bunch of sheep. I used to be a professional illustrator, and I can certainly illustrate a sheep. But what I will say I found very rewarding was, I think the color scheme in this is extremely pleasing. And also, you can see that apparently that's a haystack according to the catalog raisonné. I'm not so sure it is, but whatever. Beautiful color though, and it looks really great with the sort of maroon colors and the kind of umbery grays in the sky with a little bit of blue. Yeah, very, very pleasing. It ended up being quite a fun painting to do. Which, you know, one of the things I have to say, like, there's a spectrum of Innesses that I really like to do, and this would be outside of that. This would be too loose. But what I would say to you is that, yeah, I had to dedicate myself to painting a version of this loosely. Otherwise, if you try to get real tight when you're interpreting something that's been painted loosely, that's a recipe for disaster. Anyway, let's skip to the book here, because I want to try and get into a little bit of that Inness sort of biographical stuff from the history of American tonalism as well. So the less chatting I do in general, the more we can focus. Okay, so we're on page 398 of the catalog raisonné, and the chapter is Works of the 1890s. Now, George Inness, some of you may or may not know, he died in 1894, so this would have been right before. This painting is number 1100 in the catalog. It's called The Old Farm in 1893. Old Farm at Montclair, The Old Farm, Moonrise, The Old Farm, Montclair. Those are some alternative titles. Oil on laminated panel, very interesting and quite huge. Oh my goodness, 29 7/8 inches by 44 7/8 inches, so really big. And this conforms, I did it as an 8 by 14, which when Inness was going to do a panoramic, this was the proportion that he preferred, very much so. And it's an excellent proportion. I've got quite a few boards, and I'd love to have a crack. It's a little slightly less panoramic than my two squares, which has been my favorite up to now. Description: a woman stands in a path in the left part of the upward sloping foreground. Yeah, it's nice they said there was a path there. It was really vague, so I made a point to read this before I went in and did the color, and so yeah, I played up the path a little bit. At the far right, one Martin house stands next to the near one of what may be a fence, including it is a fence. I'm pretty sure it's a fence. Enclosing a very large haystack. Yeah, maybe it's a haystack. Another one stands close to the far end in the middle distance. There's another figure. Beyond the haystack is a shed near a very large house, right of center. At the top of the slope on the left, large trees ascend the slope. Yeah, so we're looking up a hill. That's what he's saying there. Beneath their branches, buildings are visible in the left distance, just over the top of the ridge. On the right, the moon is rising almost to the level of the high clouds, which are warmed by the late afternoon light. Yeah, I like that moon in there too. Comment. This would be written by Michael Quick, the author of this book. This landscape has the highly synthetic quality, which involves suppressing all non-essential details seen of some of Inness's very thinly painted landscapes. But its paint surface is much more layered and built up, generally with thicker paint. Inness apparently used a different process to arrive at a similar point. In this case, he seems to have repainted some areas to eliminate details and create simpler shapes. In the foreground, a yellow-brown paint appears to cover the green grass, weeds, and irregular ground that are discernible, where Inness wiped the paint in the foreground to create a soft pattern of warm and cool. Very sparingly, applications of white, black, and pink above the covering brown paint includes a minimal number of forms as softly as possible. A similar cover painted over the trees in the upper left flattens and simplifies the foliage. Additions made after this effacing of detail tend to be thin, like the tan of the haystack at the right, painted over the sky, and nearly transparent. These suppressed areas are extremely simple shapes, their forms quite soft. The lighted buildings near the horizon are more solid, with firmer edges, providing just enough solidity. Sikorski has written with great sensitivity about the effects of space and substance that Inness sought with his approach to design. And it is very beautifully designed, and the colors are very beautiful. It could have been finished off a little more, George, but hey, you know, it's a lovely painting. I wouldn't mind owning it. State of the artist was the provenance. Sold in 1895. So this would have been hanging out in his studio. Okay, this is one of the ones the estate sold. Yeah, and I consider it to be an unfinished painting personally, but it's beautiful, and it was a good exercise, and I learned a lot. And if you want to learn something about doing some painting, you want to go after some Innesses of your own, you can find my reference image for this at my website. There's a blog post, corresponding blog post to this video, and of course this video is in the blog post. That's underneath the video here. Also, I'll be popping this in my store, and who knows, at some point I may have a show with some of these Innesses, at least the ones I don't sell and things. But great way to support the channel. This one I'll probably be doing around $3.50. It's a little bigger, but it went pretty quick too, so all good there. Yeah. So let's tip into the History of American Tonalism by David A. Cleveland, because I want to keep that going too. Okay, and so right now we're on page 45. We're just picking up on this sort of biographical stuff. And he was talking previously about someone was talking about how his paintings were lumpy and garish and abstract, and to the person that was really into, say, the Hudson River School, where there was a total sublimation of brush strokes. It was all just details. Okay, that's not the case with tonalism. Tonalism brings in those brush strokes and goes very far with it. Yeah. Anyway, picking up here on page 45. As early as 1863, in a pamphlet probably written by Inness and including the thoughts of the sympathetic Boston critic James Jackson Jarves, the artist is portrayed as going head-to-head with the Hudson River School, and its penchant for local and particular. Mr. Inness, on the contrary, has long held the opinion that the only elements of the truly picturesque exist externally in any local sense, and that the highest beauty and truest value of the landscape painting are in the sentiment and feeling which flow from the mind and the heart of the artist. So it's about painting emotions, folks, okay? It's about getting your human experience of the landscape across in a painting. It's not about that spot. And number one question I get in my studio all the time is, where is this? Do you have these local sayings? Da, 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 da. And I'm always pretty vague about it, because people really care about that to a degree. If they think it's a place that they've been or know, they might buy the painting. Otherwise, they might not. His pictures illustrate phases of mind and feelings. He uses nature's form simply as a language to express thoughts. The expressive quality of the Medfield period, when Inness was first drawn to depict the poetic moods of dusk and dawn, was probably influenced by the charismatic personality and writings of Henry Ward Beecher, who encouraged his readers to explore the mind of nature through their feelings, to see through the soul. Beecher, in turn, was simply restating, in more overtly religious terms, what Emerson had written in his essay Nature. The poet conforms things to his thoughts. Page 46. Let me go move my bookmark, if you don't mind. Oopsie. Yeah, Post-it notes. They're brilliant. They're brilliant. Okay, pop that in the corner. It was during the artist's difficult wandering years of the 1860s before Inness finally won over the New York critics in the late 1870s that his image as a romantic rebel and American ingenuity began to take shape in the press and the public mind. Mr. Inness realizes, this is a quote, Mr. Inness realizes perhaps more than any of our painters the popular idea of an artist. His slight form, his marked features, his sensitive mouth, his high cheekbones and sharp-cut prominent brow, which encases dark brown eyes, now restless, now fixed, his long black hair, always in disorder, his ardent temperament and sensitive nature, his ignorance of savoir-faire of life, and all go to make up the artist. The emerging media image was no mere cant. Inness struggled with depression most of his life and attempted suicide probably more than once. He seems to have been prone to furious mood swings that were at least partly the result of highs and lows, as of his unresolved creative drives and tormenting self-doubt. In later years, his son recalled his father's fanatic artistic drive. Quote, when he painted, he put all the force of his nature into it. Full of vim and vigor, he was like a dynamo. It was a punch here and a dab there. He was indefatigable. He was a totally different man in his studio from what he was outdoors. Out of doors he was quiet, rational, and absorbed. I have seen him sit at the same spot every day for a week or more, studying carefully and minutely the contours of trees and the composition of the clouds and grass, drawing very carefully with painstaking exactness. But in his studio he was like a madman. He seldom painted direct from nature. He would study for days and then with sudden inspiration would go at a canvas with the most dynamic energy, creating the composition from his own brain, but with so thorough an understanding and underlying knowledge of nature that the keynote of his landscape was always truth and sincerity and absolute fidelity to nature. It was his honesty and simplicity that made him great. Like Hunt during the 1860s and 1870s, the constant battle for recognition by critics took its toll. Not until the early 1880s did Inness enjoy anything close to financial security. And there you go. Oh, and this last chunk is real time here. You see me zooming in and out. And fixing that. See, I can see now that I have the angle wrong in that. And you might think, how could he miss that? Well, I have to paint at a pretty extreme angle for the camera, and I do it for you. So that happens every now and again. And we fixed it pretty good. We saw it when we zoomed in. Anyway, nice little painting, huh? I really liked the way that little figure came out too. He had it super loose, super expressive. Really, I try to just follow that through and keep it going, and I'm pretty happy with the effect I got. All in all, it doesn't mean that I'm going to start painting like this. I like to keep things loose, no question about it. And there's a level of abstraction in my own stuff that's pretty great, but it's a little more finished than this. And you never know, though. I'm still, in my 50s here. Inness was painting like this in his 70s, so now there's a lot of hopefully a lot more paintings between now and when I'm 70 something. So you can never know where you'll end up. I will say that it's been very valuable for me to make paintings after Inness, and even as many studies as I did before I started this project, it's really been helping my work, especially I would say my approach to composition. I really would like to internalize that knowledge of composition that Inness had. And it's one of the hardest aspects of painting to learn. So hey, if you got all the way to the end of this video, thank you for joining me. There's a live version of this in the members area where you're there with me in the throes of battle. That's $6 a month. There's a link underneath the video. If you don't see it immediately, just click the more button and you'll see it. Click on it. By the way, some people have had problems signing up on their phones or iPads. You really need to be in the Chrome browser on a PC or a Mac, as far as I know. Anyway, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate you. Really appreciate those of you that are members as well and helping support my journey as a painter, and those of you that just send me donations via my website. You guys are awesome, and especially the member of the channel that has provided this catalog raisonné. That's a gift to all of you, not just me, because now we can speak with some knowledge about the paintings we're making studies after. So it's a great and brilliant gift by him, and I'm sure God will bless him for his generosity, and I surely thank him. Yes. So until I come back with another video, do me a favor, do me a solid, take good care of yourself, your family, all your loved ones, and try and be patient with people that have viewpoints that differ from your own. I'm not lecturing you, I'm just pointing out that none of us know everything. So until I come back with another video, do me a favor, do me a solid, take good care of yourself, your family, all your loved ones, and stay out of